You know that feeling when you first get the keys to your own place? Not your parents' house, not a college dorm, but a real, actual place that's all yours. The feeling is a mix of terror and pure, uncut freedom. That was me, standing on the porch of a small, modern-looking rental in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. It was perfect. A little cookie cutter, maybe, with its neat gray siding and a tiny square of lawn, but it was clean, it was affordable, and for the first time in my 24 years, it was mine. The moving truck groaned as it backed into the driveway, and I felt a surge of energy. This was it, the start of my actual adult life. I spent the next 6 hours hauling boxes, my muscles screaming in protest. Every piece of furniture I dragged across the threshold felt like a victory. The scuffed-up coffee table from my college apartment, the lumpy sofa I got for $50 on Facebook Marketplace, the mountain of cardboard boxes filled with books and clothes and all the random junk you accumulate without realizing it. It was in the middle of this chaos that I met the landlord, Mr. Henderson. He just kind of appeared at the front door, holding a potted plant as a welcome gift. He was a middle-aged guy, a bit soft around the middle, with kind eyes and a friendly, slightly nervous smile. He looked exactly like someone's harmless dad. "Settling in all right, Ann?" he asked, handing me the plant. "Figure the place could use a little green." "I'm getting there," I said, wiping a streak of dust from my forehead. "Thanks so much, this is really sweet. And thanks again for everything. The place is amazing." "Glad you like it," he said, his eyes scanning the living room. "It's a good little house. Very secure." He pointed to a small, white dome tucked into the corner of the ceiling, near the front door. "Oh, and that reminds me. The previous tenant, he was a real tech guy. Installed a whole smart security system. There's one here, one in the kitchen, and one on the back porch." I looked up at the camera. It was small and discreet, blending in with the white ceiling paint. "Oh wow, that's thorough." "Yeah, he was a bit paranoid, I think." Mr. Henderson chuckled. "He moved out in a hurry for a job overseas and just left it all. Said I could do what I want with it. I figured the next tenant might find it useful. It all connects to an app on your phone. You can check in on the place when you're out, that sort of thing." He pulled a folded sticky note from his shirt pocket. "Here's the login and password he left me. You should probably change it to something you'll remember." I took the sticky note. It had a generic email address and a random string of letters and numbers scrawled on it. "Great, thank you, I appreciate it." To be honest, a free security system sounded like a pretty good deal. I was a single woman living alone for the first time. A little extra security couldn't hurt. "No problem at all." "Well, I'll let you get back to it. Just give a call if you need anything. The garbage disposal can be a bit finicky." He gave another friendly nod and was gone. I stuck the note to the kitchen counter, right next to the new coffee maker that was still in its box. I'll change the password later, I thought. Right now, I had about a million other things to do. The thought of it being a security risk didn't even cross my mind. I mean, why would it? He was just a nice, slightly bumbling landlord. This was a safe neighborhood. The most immediate threat I was facing was being crushed by an avalanche of my own unpacked belongings. The rest of the day was a blur of unpacking, cleaning, and arranging. I ordered a pizza and ate it sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes, feeling more content than I had in years. I built my cheap IKEA bookshelf, set up my TV, and finally, around 10 o'clock at night, I collapsed onto the lumpy sofa. The house was quiet. The only light came from the TV, casting shifting blue shadows across the room. I felt a deep, profound sense of peace. This was home. I must have been half asleep, somewhere in the middle of a mindless reality show, when I first heard it. It was a sound so small, so out of place, that my brain almost didn't register it. A giggle. A tiny, faint, chuckling sound, but it was weirdly distorted, tinny, like it was coming through a cheap, blown-out speaker. My eyes snapped open. I grabbed the remote and hit the mute button. The room fell into absolute silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I sat perfectly still, listening, my ears strained, trying to catch it again. Nothing, just silence. The rational part of my brain immediately started offering explanations. It was the TV. I was tired, I was half asleep, and a sound from the show must have just sounded strange as I was drifting off. That had to be it. Or maybe it was just the house. Old houses make weird noises, right? Except this house wasn't old. It was probably only built 10 or 15 years ago. Okay, well, new houses settle. The pipes gurgle. The air conditioner clicks on. There had to be a logical reason. I shook my head, a little embarrassed at my own jumpiness. I was just tired, overstimulated from the move. My brain was playing tricks on me. I got up, walked through the small house, checking the locks on the front and back doors for the third time that night. They were secure. I peered out the windows into the dark, quiet street. Nothing but sleeping houses and the orange glow of a single streetlight. Everything was fine. I was safe. I was just being paranoid. I turned off the TV and headed to my bedroom, leaving the empty pizza box on the coffee table. I'd deal with it in the morning. I closed my bedroom door, something I never used to do at my parents' house, and crawled into bed. The sheets were new and crisp. The room was dark and unfamiliar, the shadows all in the wrong places. Still, I told myself, this was my space, my safe space. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the sound. That distorted little laugh. It was so specific. It wasn't a creak or a groan. It was human, but warped. I tried to push it away, to think about work tomorrow, about where I was going to hang my paintings, about anything else. Eventually, exhaustion started to win. My breathing evened out, my muscles finally unclenching. I was just about to drift off, to surrender, to sleep in the heavy silence of my new home. And then I heard it again. It was softer this time, barely a whisper of a sound. But it wasn't coming from the living room. It sounded closer, so much closer. It was a faint, breathy, electronic chuckle, like someone leaning in and whispering a secret right into a microphone from a room away. I didn't just hear it with my ears. I felt it. A cold dread that started in my stomach and shot up into my throat, choking me. My eyes flew open. I sat bolt upright in bed, my entire body rigid. My heart wasn't just thumping anymore. It was a frantic, wild drum beating against my ribs, so loud I was sure it could be heard through the walls. I stared, unblinking, into the pitch-black darkness of the room, listening. And the silence that answered was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. You don't sleep after something like that. You can't. You just lie there, a statue made of ice and adrenaline, listening to the blood roar in your ears. Every tiny creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside the window, becomes a monster. I must have stayed like that for hours, rigid in the dark, my gaze fixed on the sliver of light under my bedroom door, expecting it to be blocked at any moment by a pair of feet, but nothing happened. The sun eventually came up, painting the gray dawn sky in streaks of orange and pink. And, it's funny how daylight can make a coward out of nighttime terror. In the morning light, with the sound of a garbage truck rumbling down the street and birds chirping outside, the whole thing felt ridiculous. A distorted laugh? I was exhausted from moving. My brain was fried. It was probably feedback from my phone, or the new Wi-Fi router interfering with something. Or maybe I'd even dreamt it. My mind, desperate for a lifeline, grabbed onto that idea and held on tight. It was a dream. Just a weird, stress-induced nightmare. I forced myself through the motions of a normal day. I went to work, sat in my cubicle under the hum of fluorescent lights, and tried to focus on spreadsheets. I made small talk by the coffee machine. I pretended I was the same person who had excitedly unpacked boxes just 2 days before, but there was a new, unwelcome hum beneath the surface of everything, a low-frequency anxiety that wouldn't go away. I found myself looking over my shoulder in the office hallway. I flinched when my phone buzzed with a notification. The feeling of being watched, once a figment of my nighttime imagination, had followed me out into the world. By the time I drove home that evening, a knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. The sight of the house, my perfect little house, didn't bring me joy anymore. It looked foreboding, an empty stage waiting for the play to begin. I parked the car and sat there for a full 5 minutes, just staring at the front door, debating whether to go in. It was my house. I was paying rent. I couldn't just let a bad dream chase me out. Taking a deep breath, I got out of the car, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and weak in the silent space. Of course, no one answered. I flicked on every single light until the house was blazing. banishing every shadow. I decided to make dinner. A normal activity. Something to ground me. I put on a playlist, the cheerful pop music feeling jarringly out of place. I was chopping onions at the kitchen island, tears streaming down my face from the fumes, when it happened again. Over the sound of the music, coming from the corner of the living room, was the sound. A chuckle. It was exactly the same as before. Tinny, electronic, distorted, but this time it was louder, clearer. It cut through the pop song for just a second, a piece of audio static that had a distinct, human malice to it. I froze, the knife clutched in my hand. The music played on, oblivious. But I had heard it. There was no doubt this time. I wasn't asleep. I was wide awake, standing in a fully lit kitchen, and it had come directly from the direction of the little white dome on the ceiling, the security camera. My heart started hammering against my ribs again, a panicked bird trapped in a cage. My first thought wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a demon. It was technology, a glitch. I dropped the knife on the cutting board with a clatter and marched into the living room, my fear turning into a hot, angry determination. I stared up at the camera as if it were a person. "Okay, what the hell is going on?" I said to the empty room. I spent the next hour on a frantic, useless quest for answers. I unplugged the Wi-Fi router and plugged it back in. I checked my phone for any strange Bluetooth connections. I scoured the internet for articles about smart security cameras making random noises. I found forums discussing popping sounds, static hisses from faulty speakers, but nothing about a distorted laugh. Nothing. And then I remembered the sticky note. The one Mr. Henderson had given me. The login and password. It was still stuck to the counter, right where I'd left it. My stomach dropped. I hadn't changed the password. In the chaos of moving, in my naive belief that this was a safe, normal place, I had forgotten the most basic rule of digital security. My hands shook as I typed the app name into my phone's search bar. I downloaded it, my mind racing. Who was the previous tenant? The, quote, tech guy who left in a hurry. What if he hadn't fully disconnected his account? What if he was messing with me, some kind of weird, pathetic prank from halfway across the world? I opened the app, put in the generic email and the random string of characters from the note, and hit login. It worked. Suddenly my phone screen split into 3 live feeds. The living room, from the corner I was standing in. The kitchen, showing the half-chopped onions on the island. The back porch, looking out onto a small, dark patch of grass. I could see myself on the screen, a tiny, blurry figure staring at my phone. A wave of nausea washed over me. I wasn't just in the house. I was on the screen. I was the subject. I spent a few minutes digging through the app's settings, my tech-illiterate fingers fumbling through menus and submenus. I couldn't find a setting for audio output. I couldn't find a log of recent activity. There was nothing to suggest where the sound had come from. Frustrated and more scared than ever, I found the Master Disable button in the settings and pressed it. The live feeds went black. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next week, the house became my personal prison. The feeling of being watched was constant, a weight on my shoulders that I couldn't shake. I started taking my laptop into the bathroom with me when I showered, blasting music to cover any potential sounds. I changed my clothes in the walk-in closet with the door shut, the only room I was certain had no camera. I stopped walking around in my underwear. I found myself performing for an audience that might not even exist, tidying things I would normally leave out, sitting up straighter on the sofa. My own home no longer felt like my own. It felt like I was a house sitter, and the owner could walk in at any moment. A couple more times I heard it, a single static-filled chuckle when I was taking out the trash. A breathy, electronic sigh that seemed to come from the kitchen camera late one night as I was getting a glass of water, making me drop the glass and send shards scattering across the tile floor. I never turned the cameras back on, but the sounds still came. It didn't make sense. How could they make noise if they were disabled in the app? Were they wired directly into the house's power? Was I losing my mind? On Friday night, I caved. I needed to talk to another human being who wasn't a potential ghost or a creepy hacker. I called my best friend, Jess. "You sound tired," she said, her voice a warm welcome presence through the phone's speaker. "I am," I sighed, flopping down onto the sofa. "This new house is... I don't know. It makes weird noises. I think I'm just not used to living alone yet." "What kind of noises? Like the pipes settling?" "Yeah, stuff like that," I lied. How could I possibly tell her the truth? "Hey Jess, I think a ghost hacker is laughing at me through the disabled security cameras in my rental house." She'd think I had finally snapped. And I don't know. I just feel kind of on edge all the time, anxious. "Oh, Anne, it's a big change. Give yourself a break. Plus, you've been stressed about other stuff too, right?" I knew what she meant. "Yeah," I said, my voice dropping. I instinctively lowered my phone, turning it into a video call so I could see her face. Her familiar, smiling face was a comfort. "I stepped on the scale this morning. I've gained, 8 pounds since I started this new job. My work pants are all tight. I just feel gross." I hated admitting it out loud. It felt so vain, so stupid, but it was true. "Oh my God, stop it," Jess said, her expression softening. "You do not look gross. You look healthy. It's just stress weight. Don't be so hard on yourself." We talked for another 10 minutes, her voice a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. We made plans to get brunch on Sunday. By the time we hung up, I actually felt a little better. A little more normal. I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the cushion beside me. The screen went dark. The living room was submerged in silence again. A thick, heavy silence that felt different now. I sighed, running a hand through my hair and looking at my faint reflection in the black screen of the television. Gross. Jess was just being nice. The silence stretched for a few seconds. 10. 20. Long enough for me to start thinking about what to watch on Netflix. And then, a new sound came from the camera in the corner of the room. It wasn't a laugh. It wasn't a sigh. It was a voice. A man's voice. Raspy, slow, and saturated with that same unnatural, electronic distortion. It spoke, each word deliberate, as if it had been carefully considered. "A little extra weight looks cute on you." For a second, the world just evaporates. There is no sofa, no television, no floor beneath my feet. There is only the silence that follows the voice, and the voice itself, echoing in my skull. It's like my brain short-circuited. Every thought I ever had was gone, replaced by a single, deafening dial tone. Time stretched and became thick, like honey. I wasn't breathing. "A little extra weight looks cute on you." The words weren't just heard, they were felt. A greasy, physical intrusion into the quiet space of my living room. They hung in the air, a poisonous vapor. My eyes, wide and unblinking, were fixed on the little white dome in the corner of the ceiling. The camera. The source. It knew. It had been listening. It wasn't just some random, glitched-out noise. It wasn't feedback or interference. It had listened to my private, vulnerable conversation with my best friend. It had processed my insecurity about my own body, an insecurity I had barely admitted to myself, let alone anyone else. And it had commented on it. It had formed an opinion. A coldness started in my toes and shot up my spine. A wave of pure chemical ice. My blood felt like it had turned to slush. I could feel the color draining from my face. This wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a prank from some distant hacker. A prankster wants a reaction. They want to hear you scream. This was different. This was calm. Calculated. Predatory. It was the voice of someone who enjoys watching through the glass of a terrarium, occasionally tapping on it to see the creature inside flinch. And I had flinched. I was flinching now. 1,000 tiny muscle spasms firing off all over my body. The dial tone in my head finally broke, and a flood of pure primal panic rushed in to fill the void. My body moved before my brain gave it permission. It was a jerky, puppet-like motion. I scrambled off the sofa, my socked feet slipping on the hardwood floor. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped somewhere in my throat, a knot of pure terror. My target was the wall outlet behind the cheap side table where the little white camera was plugged in. I lunged, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grasp the plug. My fingers fumbled against the plastic, and for a horrible, eternal second I thought I was too weak to pull it out. Then, with a final, desperate yank, it came free. The small green power light on the camera blinked once, and then died. The silence that returned was different. It was heavier. It was a vacuum, charged with the memory of that voice. I stood there, panting, the plug clutched in my fist like a weapon. My knuckles were white. I stared at the dead camera, the lifeless plastic eye that was no longer watching me from that corner. But what about the others? The thought hit me like a physical blow. The kitchen. The back porch. I spun around, my gaze darting wildly. The cheerful pop playlist I'd been making dinner to earlier seemed like a memory from another lifetime. The half-chopped onions were still on the cutting board, a monument to a normal life that had ended less than an hour ago. And there, on top of the refrigerator, was another camera, a twin to the one I had just disabled. Its little green light was still on. It was watching me, right now. It was seeing my panic, my terror. It was recording my every ragged breath. I felt a surge of something new mixing with the fear, rage. A hot, furious, violated rage. How dare he? How dare this thing, this person, whoever it was, sit in my home, and watch me like a specimen in a jar? I stomped into the kitchen, my movements rigid with anger. I didn't have to climb a chair. I just reached up, grabbed the power cord that snaked down the back of the fridge, and ripped it out of the wall with a grunt. The second green light went out. 2 down, the back porch. I flicked on the outdoor light, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the glass of the back door, I could see it, tucked under the eave. The third camera. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers clumsy and stupid. The lock clicked open, and I threw the door open, letting in a gust of cold night air. I didn't care. I reached up, found the wire, and tore it from its connection box. It was a messy job. A small piece of the plastic housing came with it. I didn't care about that either. I threw the broken bit of plastic onto the grass. 3 down. All 3 were dead. I slammed the door shut, re-engaged the deadbolt, and leaned my forehead against the cool glass, my chest heaving. Silence. The house was finally, truly silent. But it wasn't a relief. I had won a battle, but I felt like I had just officially declared war. I had taken away his eyes, and I had a sickening feeling that he wasn't going to like that. That night, sleep was a foreign country I had no visa for. My bedroom was the only place I felt a sliver of safety, the only room the landlord had sworn was camera-free. But that sliver was thin and brittle. I lay in bed, under the covers, with the door locked. I had wedged a chair under the doorknob, something I'd only ever seen in movies. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary. Every sound in the house was amplified by my fear. The hum of the refrigerator kicking on in the kitchen. The groan of the pipes in the walls as the water heater did its thing. The creak of the floorboards settling. Before, these were just the sounds of a house. Now, they were him. He was in the pipes. He was in the floor. He was walking around just outside my door, testing the locks, checking for a way in. My mind, starved of sleep and fed on adrenaline, started to spiral. I had made him angry. The voice tonight, before, the laugh was just a weird glitch. But the comment about my weight, it was almost playful. A twisted, creepy kind of flirtation. It was the sound of someone who felt in control, who was enjoying the game. But what happens when you take the controller away from the player? They don't just stop playing. They get mad. They find a new way to interact. I found myself holding my breath, listening for a sound that wasn't part of the house. Footsteps on the porch. A hand on the window pane. The scrape of metal against the front door lock. The fear was so intense it was almost a physical presence in the room, a heavy blanket pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I didn't dare move. I just lay there, a statue of terrified flesh and bone, and waited for the sun to come up. Daylight did little to dispel the horror. It only illuminated the reality of my situation more clearly. I was exhausted, my eyes gritty and raw. I made coffee in a kitchen that now felt like a crime scene. I kept looking at the dead camera on top of the fridge, half expecting its light to blink back on. I knew I couldn't live like this. Calling the police felt premature and insane. What would I say? Hello, officer? I think a ghost in my security system called me cute. They'd send a social worker, not a cop. No, I had to be rational. I had to be methodical. My plan was simple. Take back complete control. The cameras were unplugged, but what if they had battery backups? I didn't know how these smart systems worked. I needed to remove them. All of them. I would take them down, put them in a box, and drive them somewhere far away. Maybe throw them in a dumpster behind a Walmart. Then I would change the Wi-Fi password. And then, and only then, would I maybe feel safe again. I finished my coffee, the bitter liquid, doing little to calm my shattered nerves. I set the mug in the sink and turned to face my first task. The kitchen camera. I needed a chair to get to it properly. I pulled one out from the small dining table, the legs scraping loudly on the tile floor. The sound was jarring in the tense silence. I placed the chair under the camera, my stomach a tight knot of dread. This felt like dismantling a bomb. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It's just plastic and wires, I told myself. It's a dead machine. It can't hurt you. I stepped up onto the chair. I was now eye level with the small, dark lens on the front of the device. It looked like a doll's eye, black, vacant, and soulless. My hand reached out, my fingers wrapping around the smooth, cool plastic of the casing. And then, it happened. Whir. Click. The camera, the dead, unplugged camera, moved. It wasn't a big movement. It was a tiny, precise, mechanical whir. The lens swiveled in its housing, maybe a quarter of an inch to the left, tracking my face. It was looking right at me. I froze, my hand still gripping the device. My blood ran cold, colder than the night before. This wasn't possible. It was unplugged. There was no power. My brain screamed, desperately trying to find a logical explanation. A residual charge? A capacitor discharging? It had to be. It had to be. My terrified hope was atomized by the sound that came next. The voice. It was back. It wasn't distorted this time. It wasn't raspy. It was clear, cold, and utterly devoid of the playful tone from the night before. It was a command. A voice saturated with annoyance and absolute authority, coming directly from the tiny speaker grill on the camera I was holding in my hand. Don't do that. My hand, the one holding the camera, didn't so much let go as it convulsed. A violent full-body flinch, like I'd grabbed a live wire. The camera clattered to the floor, the sound of cheap plastic hitting tile echoing what felt like an explosion in my head. I stumbled backwards off the chair, my legs tangling, and I landed hard on my tailbone. The pain was distant. A dull thud somewhere far away from the screaming terror that had taken over my entire nervous system. It was unplugged. The thought looped in my brain, a frantic, broken record. It was unplugged. I pulled the plug myself. I held the dead cord in my hand. It's impossible. It's impossible. I stared at the camera lying on the floor. Its little black lens was still pointed vaguely upwards, a dead eye seeing nothing. It felt like I was looking at a snake that I'd just cut the head off of, but its body was still writhing. My frantic attempt to rationalize, to find some shred of logic in the abyss, was cut short by the voice. It came from the fallen camera again, still on the floor. It was clearer now, the annoyance more pronounced, like a parent scolding a stupid child. I don't like the dark. The words weren't a plea. They were a statement of fact, a declaration of preference from the thing that was watching me. The simple, almost childish complaint was 1,000 times more terrifying than any demonic threat. It was human. It was petty. It was the voice of a man who was used to getting his way, and I had just inconvenienced him by trying to blind him in my own home. Something inside me snapped. The ice-cold fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a hot, boiling rage that felt like acid in my veins. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't a glitch. This was an invasion. My first coherent thought, rising through the panic, was the app. The stupid smart home app the landlord had me install. I had to get in. I had to factory reset the whole goddamn system, delete the account, burn it all to the ground digitally. I scrambled on my hands and knees, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. My phone was on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. I grabbed it, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The screen was a blinding white rectangle in the dimly lit kitchen. My thumb slipped twice on the passcode before I finally managed to unlock it. I found the app, a cheerful little icon of a blue house, and jabbed it open. The login screen appeared. My username was already filled in. I just had to type the password. The same password the landlord had written on a sticky note for me, the same one I hadn't bothered to change. My fingers flew across the tiny keyboard, slick with sweat. I hit enter. A small, red line of text appeared under the box. Incorrect username or password. No, that was impossible. I typed it again, slower this time, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I checked every letter, every number. It was correct. I hit enter again. Incorrect username or password. I tried a third time. Fourth. My breath hitched in my throat. I tried the original password. Then I tried variations of it. Nothing worked. It was like banging on a locked steel door. And then the realization hit me, a wave of nausea so profound I thought I was going to be sick right there on the kitchen floor. He changed it. He knew I would do this. He had watched me rip the other cameras out of the wall. He had listened to my panicked phone call. He had anticipated my every move, and he had already cut off my escape route. I was locked out of my own security system. It wasn't my system anymore. It was his. The keys he had given me were a temporary pass, and he had just revoked it. I was a guest. A prisoner. Okay, think. If I can't kill it with software, I have to kill the hardware. The brain. The whole system runs on Wi-Fi. I just had to kill the Wi-Fi. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs feeling like they were made of jelly. The router. It was in the living room, on the small media console under the TV. A little black box with blinking green lights. That was the heart of the monster. If I could just pull the plug on that, the cameras, the speakers, all of it would be nothing more than plastic junk. They'd have no way to connect. He'd be blind and mute. I stumbled out of the kitchen, my eyes locked on that little black box across the room. It felt miles away. Every shadow in the house seemed to leap and twist in my peripheral vision. The dead camera in the living room corner felt like it was watching me, even without power. I was halfway across the living room floor, my hand outstretched, my fingers just feet from the router's power cord. BZZZZZZZT. Click! The 55-inch television exploded into life. The screen flashed from black to a blindingly bright car commercial. The volume wasn't just on. It was at maximum. A tidal wave of noise and cheerful, upbeat music slammed into me, so loud it was physically painful. It was a sensory assault, a wall of sound designed to stun and disorient. A smiling family drove a shiny new SUV down a sunny coastal highway, while an announcer, with a ridiculously deep voice, screamed about 0% financing. This weekend only at your local Tri-County Toyota dealer. I flinched back, clapping my hands over my ears, but it was useless. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, through the soles of my feet into my bones. It rattled my teeth. I couldn't think. I couldn't hear my own panicked gasps. It was chaos. It was a weapon. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was actively fighting back. He was using my own home to attack me, to drive me out of my own mind. I staggered back, away from the router, away from the screaming TV. My plan was useless. My control over my environment was a complete illusion. He could turn on the lights, he could blast the TV, he could speak through the cameras. What else could he do? Could he lock the doors? Turn on the stove? Shiss. I was in a cage. A smart cage. And the zookeeper was a sick, twisted voyeur who was getting angry that his pet wasn't behaving. My mind finally found a single, desperate thought through the noise. The bedroom. He said there were no cameras in the bedroom. The landlord. My tormentor. I was clinging to a promise made by the very man who was torturing me, but it was all I had. It was the only room in the house I had a chance of being alone in. I turned and ran. I fled from my own living room like it was on fire, the blaring commercial chasing me down the hall. I slammed the bedroom door shut, the sound swallowed by the noise from the TV. I fumbled with the lock on the knob, my fingers feeling fat and clumsy. It clicked shut. For good measure, I grabbed the heavy wooden desk chair and wedged it under the knob, just as I had the night before. It felt pathetic. A flimsy wooden barricade against an enemy who controlled the very electricity in the walls. Then, I collapsed. I slid down the door to the floor, my back pressed against the wood. I curled into a ball, wrapping my arms around my knees, pressing my hands tight against my ears. The sound of the TV was still a muffled thumping bass from the other side of the door, but in here it was quieter. I was in a small, dark, quiet box. I stayed like that for I don't know how long. Minutes? An hour? Time had ceased to have any meaning. There was only the thumping of my own heart and the muffled drone from the living room. I just rocked back and forth trying to breathe. This is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up. This isn't real. Slowly the noise from the living room died. He had turned the TV off. The sudden, profound silence was almost as jarring as the noise had been. The house was quiet again. Dangerously quiet. The kind of quiet that means something is listening. I held my breath, straining my ears, listening for the next attack. A voice from the smoke detector? The lights flickering on and off? Nothing. Just the hum of a house at night. Maybe he gave up for the night. Maybe he got bored. The desperate, hopeful thought was a flicker of light in the crushing darkness of my panic. I stayed frozen, huddled against the door, too afraid to move. My eyes scanned the darkness of my room, the familiar shapes of my dresser, my closet, the window looking out onto the quiet suburban street. It looked safe. It felt safe. I had just started to let myself take a deeper, steadier breath when I heard it. It was a small sound. So small I thought I'd imagined it. Tap. It was soft. Precise. It came from the other side of the room. I froze, every muscle in my body turning to stone. Tap. Tap. It was a rhythm. Deliberate. Unhurried. It wasn't the sound of a branch hitting glass in the wind. This was intentional. My eyes, slowly, fearfully, moved towards the source, towards the large window on the far wall, the window that looked out over the front lawn, the window to my second-story bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was outside. Someone was at my window, knocking. For a second, the whole world just stopped. The muffled thump of the television from down the hall, the frantic drumming of my own heart, the air in my lungs, it all just ceased to exist. All that was left was that sound. Tap. It wasn't a loud sound. You have to understand that. It wasn't the sound of a tree branch, which is a sort of scrape and thump. It wasn't an acorn falling from a tree, which is a sharp little tick. This was different. This was the sound of a fingernail, or maybe the very tip of a single knuckle, deliberately striking glass. It was quiet. It was patient. And it came from the window on the far side of my bedroom. My second-story bedroom. My mind, what was left of it, tried to make excuses. A big bug. Maybe. A June bug hitting the glass. But it was too rhythmic. Too intentional. Tap. Tap. There it was again. A beat. Then another. Crisp and clear in the sudden quiet of the house. He turned the TV off just so I would hear this. He wanted my full attention. The thought was so cold it felt like a shard of ice sliding down my spine. The chair I had wedged under the doorknob suddenly felt like a joke. A child's toy barricade. The real threat wasn't trying to get through the door. My body was still coiled in a tight ball against the wood of the door, but my head lifted. My eyes, wide and useless in the dark, were fixed on the pale gray rectangle of the window. The streetlights outside cast just enough of a glow to outline the frame. It was a gaping mouth in the darkness of the room. I had to look. I knew I had to. It's one of those things, isn't it? The not knowing is somehow worse. Your imagination just fills in the blanks with things 1,000 times more horrible than reality. At least, that's what I told myself. Uncurling my limbs was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. My muscles screamed in protest. Every joint felt rusty and loud. I rose from the floor in slow motion, like an old woman, one hand braced against the wall to keep from falling over. The floorboards didn't creak, thank God. I was a ghost in my own room, moving towards the one thing I wanted to run from. The room felt enormous, an empty ballroom I had to cross. Every shadow was a crouching figure. The pile of clothes on my dresser was a man's slumped shoulders. The house settled with a groan, and I almost screamed. My breath was a prisoner in my chest. I reached the wall next to the window. I pressed my back flat against the cool drywall, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. He was right there. On the other side of this wall, this pane of glass. How? A ladder? Had he propped a ladder against the side of my house in the middle of the night? The sheer audacity of it was insane. This wasn't some shadowy hacker in another country. This was a man with a ladder. My hand, trembling, reached for the edge of the curtain. The fabric felt thick and heavy, like a stage curtain before a show I didn't want to watch. I told myself to just do it, rip it open, end the suspense. But my fingers wouldn't obey. They just plucked nervously at the hem. Tap, tap, tap. It was louder now, sharper, right next to my ear. He knew I was there. He knew I was hesitating. It was a summons. Look at me. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a breath that felt like I was breathing in razors, and pulled. I didn't yank the curtain all the way back. Just an inch. A tiny little gap to peek through, my eye pressed right up against the fabric. I prepared myself to see a face. A mask. Eyes staring back at me. There was nothing. Just the empty front lawn, bathed in the sickly orange glow of the streetlights. The neighbors' perfectly manicured flower beds. A car. Driving slowly down the street at the far end. No ladder. No person. No footprints in the damp grass. Nothing. I held my breath, scanning every shadow, every bush. Nothing moved. It was a perfectly still, perfectly normal suburban night. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me, so strong my knees almost buckled. It was followed instantly by a new, more profound wave of terror. I hadn't imagined it. I knew I hadn't. That sound was real. Which meant he had been there. He had tapped on my window, and in the few seconds it took me to cross the room, he was gone. He was fast. He was quiet. And he was playing with me, showing me that he could get to me, physically, whenever he wanted. That no room was safe, no lock could stop him. He could appear at my second-story window and vanish into thin air. I stumbled back from the window, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a sob. My safe room. My one sanctuary. It was just another part of the cage he'd probably let me run in here. He'd probably watched me wedge the chair under the door, enjoying the pathetic little security measures I was taking, knowing all along he could just come around the outside. The landlord's words echoed in my head. No cameras in the bedroom. It wasn't a promise, it was a technicality. Why would you need a camera in a room when you can just stand outside the window and look in? Promise. That's when the rage came back, hot and sharp, cutting through the fear. The sheer violation of it all. This wasn't just some creep getting his kicks. This was a predator, and I was his prey, and he was taking his sweet time cornering me in my own den. The game was over. I wasn't going to play anymore. I wasn't going to hide and wait for his next move. Police. The thought was a lightning strike in the fog of my panic. Why hadn't I done it already? I was so caught up in the digital side of it, trying to fight him on his terms, that I'd forgotten about the real world. A man was harassing me. A man was trespassing, physically trying to intimidate me at my window. This wasn't a glitch in an app anymore. This was a crime. A real-world call-the-cops crime. My phone. It was still on the kitchen counter, where I'd left it after trying to log into the app. Of course. The one place I didn't want to go. I'd have to leave this room, go back into the hallway, past the living room where he could blast the TV at me again, and into the kitchen where that dead-eyed camera sat on the floor. But I had no choice. Staying in here was a death sentence. It was just waiting for him to get bored of tapping and decide to break the glass instead. Okay, Anne, you can do this. I took the chair away from the doorknob. The sound of wood scraping against wood felt deafeningly loud. I felt like I was announcing my plan to him. I'm coming out now. I turned the lock. The click was a gunshot in the silence. I put my hand on the cool metal of the knob and paused. I listened. The house was silent. Too silent. Was he waiting for me? Was he right outside the door? Hess. Screw it. I pulled the door open and ran. I didn't tiptoe. I didn't creep. I sprinted. Down the short hallway, my bare feet slapping against the floor. I didn't look into the living room. I kept my eyes fixed on the entrance to the kitchen, a dark square at the end of the hall. I half expected the TV to explode into sound again, or for his voice to come crackling from the speaker in the living room camera, but there was nothing. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing. I burst into the kitchen, my eyes immediately finding my phone. It was right where I left it, its screen dark. A beautiful, wonderful black rectangle of hope. I snatched it up. My hands were shaking so violently it was a miracle I didn't drop it. My thumb, slick with sweat, smeared across the screen as I tried to swipe up. It took me 3 tries to unlock it. The home screen appeared, a grid of cheerful, oblivious icons. I ignored them all, my thumb jabbing at the green phone icon. My mind went blank for a second. The number. What was the number? It's amazing, the simple things that abandon you when you're terrified. 911. Of course. My thumb hovered over the keypad. 9. The key lit up. 1. My heart was going to beat its way out of my chest. I could feel him watching me. I could feel his disappointment. The pet was calling for help. The game was about to be ruined. 1. The 3 digits stared back at me from the screen. All I had to do was press the green call button. 1 touch, and it would be over. 1 touch, and people with guns and badges would come. 1 touch, and I would be safe. My thumb moved towards the button, a slow, trembling journey of a few millimeters. Click. It wasn't a sound from a speaker. It was a real sound. A heavy, final, mechanical sound that came from everywhere at once. And with it, the world ended. Total darkness. Utter and complete. The lights went out. The faint hum of the refrigerator died. The little green blinking lights on the router in the living room. Gone. He had cut the power. He had cut the main power to the whole house. The only light left in the entire world was the pale, ghostly glow of my phone's screen, illuminating my own terrified face and my trembling hand. I was frozen. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was heavier and more menacing than any noise he had ever made. It was absolute. The kind of silence that lets you hear everything. The blood pumping in your ears. The frantic little gasps escaping your own lips. And, from downstairs, a sound. It was so quiet I wasn't sure I'd heard it. It was drowned out by the pounding in my ears. I held my breath, straining, listening into the suffocating blackness. There it was again. Scrape. The sound of metal on metal. Faint. Coming from the back of the house. The sliding glass door that led to the small, overgrown backyard. Lurch. Thump. It was the sound of the security bar being clumsily lifted out of its track. The flimsy piece of metal I put there every night, thinking it made me safer. And then the last sound I ever wanted to hear. A soft, whispering slide. The sound of the glass door gliding open on its track. He wasn't outside the window anymore. He was in the house. The phone screen was my entire universe. A cold, white rectangle floating in an ocean of absolute black. My own face stared back at me from the glow. A stranger's face. Pale and slick with sweat. Eyes wide with a terror so pure it felt ancient. The silence in the house was a physical thing. It pressed in on my eardrums, filled my lungs, a heavy, suffocating blanket where there used to be the hum of a refrigerator and the soft whir of a life. My thumb was still frozen over the green call button. 911. 3 numbers that were supposed to be a magic spell against the dark. But he was faster. The click of the power grid dying was the sound of him cutting the last thread connecting me to the outside world. And then there was that other sound. The whisper slide of the glass door. He wasn't playing games through a speaker anymore. He wasn't tapping on a window. He was in the house. The thought didn't land with a scream. It landed with a strange, cold clarity. The game had changed levels. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were nailed to the linoleum floor of the kitchen. My whole body was just one big nerve ending. Waiting for the next sound, the next sign of where he was. The sliding door was in the living room, just off the kitchen. Was he in there now, moving through the dark he had created? My hand, the one holding the phone, started to shake uncontrollably. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand here and wait for him to find me. My thumb slid off the call screen and jabbed at the flashlight icon. A brilliant white beam cut through the darkness. It was weak, just a phone flashlight, but in that total blackness, it felt like a searchlight. I didn't want to look. You never want to look. But not looking is how you die. I pivoted slowly, the beam of light preceding me like a nervous scout. It swept over the familiar shapes of my kitchen, the microwave, the coffee maker, the fruit bowl on the counter. They all looked alien and sinister in the harsh, isolated light. I pointed the beam towards the opening that led back to the living room and the hallway. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I held my breath and stepped forward, moving the beam in a slow, deliberate arc across the living room. It passed over the couch, the coffee table, the big, dead screen of the television. And then, it hit the back wall. The sliding glass door stood wide open, a gaping black mouth leading out into the night. And standing just inside of it, waiting for me, was my landlord. It was him. The friendly, slightly paunchy middle-aged man who had told me the neighborhood was so safe. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was just standing there in a plain gray sweatshirt and jeans, his face calm, almost pleasant. The only thing that was wrong, truly wrong, was the thing in his hands. He was holding a tablet, and its screen glowed, casting a sickly blue light up onto his face. He smiled when my flashlight beam found him. It wasn't a crazy, maniacal smile. It was a gentle, reassuring smile. The kind of smile you give a child who's just woken up from a nightmare. "There you are," he said. His voice was quiet, conversational. Not the distorted, crackling voice from the cameras. Just his normal voice. I was getting worried. My mind just short-circuited. I couldn't process it. The landlord. The guy the first gave a check to. The one who told me where to put the trash cans out on Tuesdays. He was the one who had been listening to me, watching me, talking to me through the walls. My flashlight beam was trembling, bouncing around his face. He took a slow step into the living room, towards me. The tablet in his hands was angled just so, and in the glare I could see what was on the screen. It was a grid of videos, little boxes, each showing a live feed. I saw my own living room from the corner camera. I saw the kitchen, the camera on the floor where I left it. I saw the front porch. And then I saw something new. It was a view of my bedroom, from an angle I had never seen before. From a low position on my nightstand, looking up at my bed. My empty, messy bed, where I had been curled up in a ball just 10 minutes ago. My heart stopped. The alarm clock. The new-looking digital alarm clock that was there when I moved in. It had a tiny, black, unblinking eye. He saw me looking at the tablet. He angled it towards me. A proud little presentation. Better resolution on this one, don't you think? HD. The audience appreciates quality. The audience? My brain snagged on the word. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I was trapped in some bizarre, waking nightmare. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper. The words came out thin and reedy. He took another step. He was at the edge of the kitchen now. "What do I want? Anne, I just want you to be you. It's what they paid for." He gestured with his chin towards the tablet. "It's been a fantastic show so far. You're very popular. But you trying to call the police? That's not in the script. They voted against it." He smiled that placid, awful smile again. "Don't be scared," he said, and the words hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were the same words from the blueprint of my terror. It's just me, just interacting with the audience's favorite character. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The fear didn't go away, but it transformed. It crystallized into something hard and sharp. The game was over. I wasn't prey anymore. I wasn't a character in his sick show. My entire life, every private moment, every tear, every word I'd spoken in this house had been broadcast for entertainment. The pure, undiluted violation of it ignited a rage so hot it burned away the paralysis. His eyes flickered past me, towards the front door. He thought I was going to run. It was the logical move. He was blocking my path to the living room door, but the front door was just down the short hall. He was already shifting his weight, ready to cut me off. But my eyes weren't on the front door. They were on the heavy, ceramic pottery vase on the small breakfast table to my left. It was a housewarming gift from my mom. It was filled with sand and fake flowers. It weighed a ton. As he took one more step into the kitchen, I moved. There was no thought, just pure, animal instinct. I dropped my phone, the light dying as it clattered to the floor, and in the same motion, my hands were around the vase. I ripped it off the table, sand and plastic petals spilling everywhere. He grunted in surprise, his placid expression finally breaking. He hadn't expected this. The character was going off script. I screamed. It wasn't a scream for help. It was a raw, guttural battle cry torn from the deepest part of my soul. I swung the vase with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening wet thump. The tablet flew from his hands, crashing to the floor with a crack of splintering glass. He staggered back, a look of utter shock on his face, one hand flying up to his temple. He stumbled against the doorframe, his eyes glassy. I didn't wait to see if he would fall. I knew I only had seconds. I spun around, but not towards the front door. He would recover. He would still be faster. I ran towards the large picture window in the dining area right next to the kitchen. Next to it was a single wooden dining chair. Again, no thought, just action. I grabbed the back of the chair and, using the last of my adrenaline-fueled rage, I swung it like a bat directly into the center of the big pane of glass. The sound was an explosion, a deafening crash of shattering glass that seemed to shake the whole house. The window disintegrated into 1,000 glittering shards. A cold night wind rushed into the room. For a split second, I hesitated, looking at the jagged teeth of glass lining the frame. Then I heard him groan behind me, stirring. Screw it. I put my hands on the sill, ignoring the sharp points digging into my palms, and scrambled through. Pain flared sharp and hot along my legs and arms as shards of glass sliced through my pajamas, but it felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I tumbled out onto the wet, mulchy flower bed outside, landing hard on my hands and knees. I didn't stop. I pushed myself up and I ran. I ran out onto the dark, empty street, the cold asphalt biting at my bare feet. I didn't look back. I just ran towards the nearest pool of orange streetlight, and I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, stupid, nonsensical words of terror and help, over and over again. Lights started flicking on in the houses around me. A dog started barking. A porch light flashed on, and then another. A door opened, a man's silhouette appearing. Hey, what the hell's going on? I finally risked a glance back at my house. It was still a dark, silent box, but the front door was open. He was standing there, a dark shape against the deeper darkness within, clutching his head. He saw me. He saw the lights coming on, the neighbors emerging. He knew the show was over. He just stared at me for a long second, then retreated back into the blackness of the house. Moments later, the night was torn apart by the sound of sirens. They caught him in the house. He didn't even try to run. The police said he was sitting on the couch in the dark, just waiting for them. The next few weeks were a blur of police stations, therapists, and sleepless nights in my parents' guest room. I never went back to that house. My dad and his brother went and packed up my things, throwing most of it away. I didn't want any of it. It all felt contaminated. I found a new apartment, a third-floor walk-up in a busy part of the city. No smart home tech. No shared security. I had 3 deadbolts on the door. I covered the camera on my laptop with a thick piece of tape. I felt okay. Not good, but okay. I thought the worst was over. I thought the horror had an end. Then, about a month after it happened, I got a call from Detective Miller, the lead investigator on the case. "Anne," he said, his voice tired and professional over the phone, "we're still going through through Arthur Jennings' devices. It's extensive. But something came up I thought you should be aware of." I sat down on my new, unfamiliar couch. "Okay." There was a pause. I could hear him shuffling papers. "He wasn't just watching you for himself, Anne. He was live-streaming everything. The cameras in the house, even the hidden one in your bedroom. It was all being broadcast 24/7 to a private forum on the dark web." The air left my body. My hand gripped the phone tighter. "What?" "It was a pay-per-view site," he continued, his voice flat, just reporting the facts. "Viewers would pay in cryptocurrency to watch. They could also pay extra to make quote requests. They used a polling system. They would vote on what he should say to you through the speakers. They voted on when to flicker the lights. They even voted on the night he entered the house. Apparently, that was the season finale." My blood ran cold. Season finale. What was the stream called? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Detective Miller sighed. It was the first hint of emotion I'd heard from him. "It was called The Dollhouse. Your stream was The Dollhouse, Season 3 feet. A wave of nausea washed over me. Season 3. "Detective," I said, a new, even more profound dread dawning. "What about Season 1 and 2? Silence on the other end of the line. For a long, long time. "Anne," he finally said, and his voice was gentle now. "The 2 previous tenants of that house were both young women. Both were reported as missing persons. We never found them." I hung up the phone. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. I was hollowed out. I walked over to the window of my new, safe apartment on the 3rd floor. I looked down at the street below, at the crowds of people walking by, their faces anonymous, illuminated by the glow of their own phones. Men, women, young, old. They were just people. Strangers, but they weren't just strangers anymore. I had escaped the house. I had survived the finale. But the audience was still out there. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. They could be anyone. Anywhere. Walking past me on the street right now. Looking up at my window. The show was over, but I knew, with a certainty that would haunt me for the rest of my life, that the invisible audience was still watching, and they were just waiting for a new season to begin.